Good. I just got off a call with my international alliance partners in Europe and all that stuff, and just told them I had to go, and here we are.
Nice. How's business?
Business has been good for us. During the whole pandemic, we've seen an increase in business. So we have challenges like any other business with supply chain and all that kind of stuff related to COVID, but the overall business increased during these times.
Yeah. Well, that actually makes sense, doesn't it?
I guess so. And I saw a thing in the Forbes magazine not long ago, a couple of weeks ago, about people's change of values and interest. And a lot of them really had changed into wanting to learn new things, make a different life, all that stuff. It's more of an openness to engaging with various content systems, people, books, whatever, that would give them some new understanding because they were reinventing themselves.
Yeah, it's absolutely vital that we do that. And it's good to hear that a lot of people are doing that. I run into that a lot as well. At first, it seemed like when the pandemic first hit that everyone was just making a run to the liquor store and they're going to play more video games and have more cocktails and ride this out. And I have friends who did that for a long time. But, a lot of us, when this hit, we looked at it and went, okay, new paradigm coming. We've got to get ready for it.
In the first month or so, I saw the opposite of that. I saw people that were really sort of getting it. This was a big deal, a big planetary event. The planet was being put on pause, and that we were in an opportunity to make some big changes and to create something new. This was a big gift and all that. And then after it went on, right. In the liquor store and the video games.
Yeah, no, I saw a split, but then some flip. Some people who had been on the couch drinking for a couple of months started to go, I can't do this for the next 2 years. I better get some exercise and sort myself out and maybe learn to meditate. And then other people I had some very kind of, I guess you call spirit head friends who, were really, waiting for the Palladians and charging their crystals and stuff. And they started to go down a dark hole in the last year, realizing that things aren't turning as fast as they had hoped when this thing hit.
That's right. So I've seen it's been up and down for everybody, really,
Yeah.
And now we're in this phase of, I don't know, trying to reemerge from it, but not really able to. And it's like still an awkwardness to it all. So.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so I popped a couple of questions. I want to be respectful of your time. And I guess first question is, do you have a hard stop?
No, I don't. I don't have anything till 11:30. So
okay,
we'll go over a little if we need to.
Okay, cool. And the next thing is, I know that sometimes I know you've led thousands of meditations. Would you mind doing a little 5 minutes or something like that at the end?
No, we can do that. Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that would be awesome. Good. Just give some people an actual taste of some of what HeartMath is, some of how to get actually into their heart space and open up. Sure.
What do you experience with them?
Yeah, that's right. You want to leave them with the taste.
Anyway, by the way, I should ask that question.
What's that?
Who's your audience? Who are these people that listen to your podcast?
I shoot for two people in terms of my demographic. One is people who are kind of still in the mainstream and are starting to wake up and realize that doesn't work. And they're looking for kind of a lifeline to get out of the mainstream into something that is more heart-centered and more spirit-based, yet still has its roots in science, which is why I love HeartMath. And then the other part of my demographic are people who are not in the mainstream. I call them the spirit head community. They're people who, they are utilizing the law of attraction in their life. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. They are into that spiritual connection, and yet there's a piece that's missing for them, and that is that they're actually not just creating their world, that they're creating the world. And if they understand that this entire planet and everything that's going on in our shared consensus reality, that they have responsibility for that they have impact on that, then we can harness a whole planet full of powerful manifestors to realize that they're creating the entire world from the inside out, not just their microcosmic world. And I would say I probably have more of the second group than I do of the first group.
Okay, cool.
So what I'll do is I'll do, my normal radio DJ intro, and then I'll thank you for being on the show, and you can say a couple of words, and then I'll just set the table. I'll take a couple of minutes and explain why I wanted to have you on the show, and then I'll get you rolling with the questions.
No problem.
Cool. Actually, I'm going to drop into my heart for just a moment before we go.
Good idea.
Let's take a couple of breaths together. Okay. I'm ready if you are. I just had a heart opening. That's a good sign. Let's do this.
Okay.
All right. Hello and welcome to the Evolutionary. My name is David Knox. I'm still your host, and I am excited to welcome you to a very special episode. We have superstar and executive vice president of HeartMath, Howard Martin, with us today. Howard, thank you so much for being on the show.
Hey, David, it's a pleasure. Appreciate you having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation, and I hope everybody that's going to give their time and attention to this is going to enjoy it as well.
Yeah, well, I know we have some good information coming for them, as well as some good things that they can actually walk away with and implement in their lives. Before we jump into the questions, I just wanted to take a couple of minutes and set the stage and I guess context for why I asked you to be on the show and why I'm so excited to have you on the show. So longtime listeners of the show will understand, that the premise of the Evolutionary, and it's in the 30-second version is this: we live in a holographic fractal universe, and that means that the pattern that creates everything in the universe and the information that's behind that is present at all scales and everything in the universe. And what that means is that we are holographic fractal representations of the universe. Its nature is our nature. And one of the things that we see when we look across academic and scientific disciplines that they agree upon is that the evolution, that the universe is evolutionary, is that everything is evolving in the universe, all of the systems and at all scales. And if that's true, then what that means is that the universe's primary impulse, the thing that it wants for us, is to evolve. And that's what it's pushing us to do. And of course, there's an underlying element of this that says that the universe is conscious and alive, right? Mm-hmm. And so if the universe is driving us to evolve, if we understand that and we get on board with that, then a lot of things in our lives start to make sense and start to clear up and start to get a lot easier. And we can actually become intentional participants in the creation of our own evolutionary curriculum. And when we do that, now we're working in concert with the universal mind, and things start to flow, and we can create things on Earth and in this human form that we never dreamed of. Now, one of the tenets of this is that we're walking around in this amazing, let's just for conversational convenience call it technology, that is the human beingness. Right. And it didn't come with an owner's manual, and it can do all of these things, but we don't know how to use, most of us don't know how to use most of the features of it. It's like my mom with her iPhone. She calls me on the phone to ask me directions to my house. She calls me on her iPhone. You see, she calls the bank to find out what her balance is. She literally can barely send a text, and she's got this amazing computing device in her hand she has no idea how to use. And I feel like that's the way most of us are with this technology of the human self. And so, but if we knew how to use all of the features, it's capable of creating miracles. We can do absolutely anything on this plane. And I think that I've heard you talk about being on the doorstep of a brand new paradigm. I'm massacring your quote, by the way. The terminology that I use is that we're on the threshold of the age of miracles, where people start to learn to use the technology of the human self in greater and greater ways. And absolutely fundamental to all of that, and you see this across disciplines and across teachers in our current era, is getting into the heart space and learning to use the heart, learning to understand what it is, what it does, what it's capable of, and then actually how to tap into that. And so, and with an underpinning of science, because that's the language that we talk in today. That is what drives our current paradigm, and that's what's going to drive a paradigm shift, is being able to tie this all together with science. So that, and I know that is absolutely what HeartMath is about, and that's why I'm excited to have you on the show today. And so before we jump into the heart itself, I would like to go back and start at the beginning. For any of my listeners who don't know what HeartMath is, or don't know who who you are, which would be completely inconceivable, but get your head out of the sand, people. Tell us about yourself, your early life, how you intersected eventually with Doc Childre, and how you got into this work that is HeartMath. And of course, what is the organization? What does it do?
David, I'd be happy to do that. Let me just comment on a couple of things that you said just a minute ago. To me, I do believe that the universe is an evolutionary system. That's it. It's a constantly evolutionary system. And some of the new science and the things that you mentioned earlier about the fractal, holographic relationship to it all, give us a bigger or wider understanding that gives us a sense of expansion beyond our normalness and beyond our ordinary day-to-day existence. And I think that's important. What's happening in these times is that, the human operating system is being upgraded. I'll use your technology example now. We're going through a systems upgrade. And that is really, it can be characterized a number of ways. And one of the ways in which I see it is a dimensional shift in consciousness is happening within us. Dimension in this context is not a physical location. Sort of the range of awareness, the box in which we operate in through the awareness filters that we have. And the expansion of that box is happening for us, and we're moving rather dramatically up the scale, up the spiral, into another level of dimensional access, which changes the way we perceive, the way we think, the way we feel, and accesses more of our co-creative ability to not only create a better life for ourselves, but to co-create a better world through collaborative interaction with each other. So I'm with you on all of that. And that's what evolution is really about. And that's what these times are about. And that's why they're so unique and so unusual in ways, because the process of moving from one dimensional state to another is not just an easy process. It's not just we get zapped and it happens. There's work to be done, for that. And
yes.
That's the phase that we're in right now. And so part of what HeartMath has always done is take it from what our founder, Doc Childre, called from sky to street, meaning from all the wideband understandings of all this. And, that gives us the inspiration and the expansive thinking, but you got to then integrate that down into how you live your life, what you do day to day, moment to moment, how you treat yourself, how you treat others, all of that has to happen, for this integration to occur and for this dimensional shift to take place. And it's happening very quickly for many people. So for me, this goes back a long way now. I've had to reflect on that recently because, my personal growth process, let's call it, has been going on close to 50 years now. It began for me as a very young man with a couple of interesting realizations. And when I talk about realizations, I don't want to imply that I was sitting in my house and had this big epiphany and a cloud came down from the sky or something. They were more practical than that. But what I determined early on in my life is that life was about growth, tagging into what you said that we have a much better understanding of now. But as a young man, the simplistic understanding for me is that that's what I was here for. I was here to become better. I was here to grow, and that my growth had to be at the very center of what life was going to be about for me. That it was about evolution. It was about growth. The second part of that realization is that it had to be about service to others in some ways. In other words, whatever you gained, it had to be expressed in ways in which there was a benefit to it that benefited other people and benefited the world. So those were two cornerstone principles that I look back at now, almost 50 years later, and say they've still been the internal compass for me, throughout this entire process. Now, back then, at age 21 or whatever that was, my lifestyle was very different. I was a rock musician, and I had worked my way into the levels to where I was playing with people with records out and involved in that whole rock music scene, right?
Yeah.
So I had a very different lifestyle that was not necessarily supporting, the other aspects of what I determined. That's a kind way of saying it.
Yeah.
Early on, I did meet Doc Childre, who's the man who founded HeartMath. Just a little bit older than me, like only 4 years, but he had an awareness that was quite different than mine. And through our initial friendship, it evolved into being certainly a lot more than friends. And he was the one who introduced me really to the understanding of heart, that he talked about heart in a different way. He would just say flat out, heart's written about everywhere. It's in all the spiritual books, all the major spiritual systems and religions talk about heart in these really cool ways. But, it's not making it to the street. It remains.
Right. It's not attainable.
Yes, it remains, in the respected confines of spirituality and philosophy. But when you ask people, a lot of times, ordinary folks, what heart means, and you think they're going to say, well, it means this thing that pumps blood. And sometimes they did say that. But they would also say, oh, it's that part of myself where my real self is, or a part of myself where love comes from, or a part of myself, they had these sort of intuitive, innate references to what heart was. So the exploration of heart for us was really, how do we take it from sky to street? First of all, how do we cultivate more of that relationship that we have with heart? And then how do we put it in a practical context? And so that was a long process, really working myself out of the music business after a number of years, making a conscious choice to let that go, to pursue life from back to the original compass, which is like, this is about growth. This is about me being famous. This has to be about something else. Making a hard choice to leave that behind and to focus on what I would call first things first. It was through Doc and through association with friends that we began to collaborate more. We began to, have a social context for the whole thing. It was being done in an environment that didn't support that at all. It was in Eastern North Carolina, which was a very conservative, basically, I'm not judging this, but basically Bible Belt area. Right. There was nothing of the spiritual, work that was being done in the other parts of the world that was there. It was very difficult for us to even know about it.
Right.
Way before internet, right? So, it was very difficult to find out any of that. And so that became an asset for us, really, because what happened is we ended up in uncharted water. Yeah, we read the books and we practice some of the things in the books and all that, but we never really married any of the systems. We took from them. We took the essence of them. We applied them in our life. And step by step, we built it, but we really were operating, in a vacuum in a sense. So we developed something that was different, because it was uncharted in a way. That lasted, actually, believe it or not, most people don't know this because HeartMath's already been around so long. They seem like it's been around forever, 30 years now. But that work took place over 15 years before there ever was a HeartMath.
Wow.
15 years. And eventually we got to the point where we realized that we learned a lot and that we need to find ways in which we could share it, going back to the other part of the compass story, right?
Howard, when you were doing that work for 15 years, was it, what did that look like? Did you have a group of people that were kind of a mass of people that were coming around you? Was it just you and Doc meditating? Like what did that look like?
Small group of people, close-knit friendships, people that were doing the same thing, interested in the same type of journey, right? And we did meet regularly. We did do meditations. We did do lots of different things, lots of physical disciplines. If I want to put my resume of the stuff that I did, even just on the physical stuff. If somebody sees me now, eating a hamburger, and then they want to judge me about that, I'll put my resume on the line of all that I did to get to that hamburger.
Why you can eat that hamburger and still be healthy.
I've been on the no meat diet, the no sugar diet, the no salt diet, the no food diet. I did the whole thing, right? And so we had a lot of disciplines we did. We were doing definitely our own, inner work processes. A lot of interaction, working things out between each other, learning about that, learning about how to clear things, about how to, go a little deeper, certainly challenging ourselves, around, our gaps and the things that we needed to change. And that process still goes on today, right? This is an evolutionary process.
Absolutely.
So it's a continuous process of that, at clearing at different levels, of refinement at different levels. But we were doing a lot of that even back then. And what was interesting is that even in the vacuum, we began to attract others to us. We weren't out there seeking attention. We didn't have a name. We didn't call ourselves anything. We weren't HeartMath back then. We were just a group of folks who were, who were doing that sort of work with each other. But it began to draw and magnetize. And eventually we met people from California. They had an organization. They had their own consciousness university, and they had businesses and stuff. And we made deep friendships with them that over a number of years of the cultivation of those friendships led to a decision to come to California, where I am now, from North Carolina, and to start something. And we had no business plan, at the time. We definitely didn't have a lot of money. We didn't have any outside funding or any of the things that people utilize to start a business. But we were following a deeper intuitive guidance from our heart. And step by step, we put it together. And now 30 years later, HeartMath, you can comfortably say without hubris, I think, that we have a huge footprint in the world. We've changed the lives of millions of people.
Yes.
We've recast this whole understanding of heart. We've reintroduced an understanding of things like coherence that people didn't know about. We've introduced a language, in a sense, that the world
absolutely.
And as people that have written about us said, we brought in a new understanding of heart at both the psychological and physical level, all at the same time. Yeah. And been able to put that into the world in ways in which people have benefited from it. And that's happened over a very long period of time now. And I'm appreciative and honored that I've been able to be a part of it. You mentioned science. We can get into that. I know you have some other questions to me about that, but one of the key components of how we did it was we brought science into the picture. You used a great term a minute ago when you said, science is the language of modern times, right?
Yeah.
You utilize that language to take heart from sky to street. That was the bridge. Science was the bridge we chose to use to make that integration happen.
Yeah, and it's absolutely vital that we use that in today's world, because science has all of the equity in terms of determining paradigm, right? And so if we can't speak in terms of science, then we're not going to shift that paradigm, which obviously needs to shift if we're going to have a planet to live on, 20, 35, 40 years from now.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into the heart a little bit. I've heard you talk ad nauseum about the intelligence of the heart. Can you share some thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's just the innate intuitive intelligence that we have. It's an intelligence that's high speed. I mentioned intuitive. It is intuitive. It has a different sort of bandwidth that it's accessing to bring information into us. We're born with it. It's part of who we are. It's really a true, authentic self. It's the real self that's in us, not the assumed self, not the personality self, not the self that we've created to fit into society or try to please others. It's the more true, honest, authentic, more noble and higher dignified self that we have. And it exists in the heart's intelligence. It is a place that many people have accessed randomly. It's certainly a place that we go inside when we're looking for some self-security or some answers. A lot of times the challenges we may face, there's no real logical answer for that or how to deal with it. It can seem overwhelming, seem like there is no way out or no hope, those sort of things. When we find ourselves in life in those places at times, we tend to try to go deeper anyhow. It's a natural part of how we go about it. Some people would pray, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Some people would meditate. Some people may just take that walk in nature, and they're really pulling on something deeper. And what they're trying to access is the heart's intelligence, right? Deeper. Place inside, if I may finish one stream of thought here and then jump back, please. It's the birthplace of the emotional qualities that are the ones that are the highest qualities we can access, the ones that give us the most reward, the ones that are most meaningful. And there are words that have been always associated with heart in some way, like love, care or compassion, kindness, tolerance, patience, non-judgment. All those qualities are like born from this heart's intelligence. And so you put all that together and you have this sort of really cool, unique intelligence that has always been there. And what HeartMath has been about is just a simple system of trying to reconnect people to something that they already have inside so they can evolve that within themselves. And in doing so, they move into a different dimensional state of awareness.
Yes. Yes, I love that. In my time over the years, some of the things that I learned about heart, both experientially and from listening to authors like yourself, is that you said it's very rapid in terms of its delivery of information, and this is part of the training that I try to put myself through is recognizing that instant hit of intuition, because it's right now. But the heart doesn't need time to consider. It's not using rational linear logic to make decisions. It just knows. It's that inner knowing. And I feel like the challenge that a lot of us have is that we've got so many things coming from the traumas of our past and everything that dogpile on a situation as soon as we let's say, as soon as we are encountered with a decision to make, let's say, or we meet someone, we have that initial intuitive hit, and immediately we got this dog pile of all of these other responses from, all of the traumas of our past or whatever. If we can learn to recognize that first hit, that's the one that came from the heart, and it's always right. And then some of the other things that I found very interesting is that the heart actually has neurons in it. It actually has brain cells in it, not a bunch, like 40,000 or something like that, but that the afferent pathways to the brain, the ones that send information from the heart to the brain, are way bigger than going the other way around. Is that right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And when we started HeartMath, we were looking at the physical heart. We could have begun to research much more expansive concepts, and we chose to go from the ground up, in a sense. Today HeartMath research is huge and covers lots of different areas that are very, very fascinating, interesting. Everything from global interconnectivity and Earth's energetic fields. All of that is part of the research base we have today. But at the early stages of it, where we were looking to see what the physical heart was doing, that would imply an intelligence. And we found it was interesting that there were pieces of the story that had been sort of scattered through the research literature where it was implied that it was, going all the way back into the 1970s, people were talking about that and showing scientific research that the heart appeared to have a mind of its own, at a physiological level. What Roland McCready and our scientific team, in collaboration with other researchers around the world, did was put together a story that finally made sense, and that someone like me, who's not a trained scientist, could understand and then express. And it was the story of how the heart physically communicates with the brain and the rest of the body, and the 4 pathways in which it does that. One of the pathways you just mentioned is a neurological communication. And the heart has a very complex nervous system. What we found was it's actually being studied already. The field is called neurocardiology. And there were researchers and scientists that were neurocardiologists, right? But nobody knew this stuff, right? And so
I didn't.
There's this very complex nervous system. Next to the brain, it is the most complex part of our nervous system. And it does contain neurons. You mentioned exactly right, about 40,000, which is a small amount, but the fact that they were there at all was a surprise. And what's interesting about it is that most of those neurons are what's called local circuit neurons. And in the brain, they're the neurons that are responsible for memory. So you have a lot of these memory neurons inside the heart. So this nervous system is communicating with the brain, and it does it through a nerve pathway that goes from the heart back up, enters the brain through the lower brain centers, the medulla, it's instinctual brain. But then what's interesting is that nerve pathway continues, moves on and deeper into the brain. It goes into the limbic system. The limbic system is where a lot of our emotional processing is taking place. Mm-hmm. And it's being influenced by the heart. And then it goes all the way up into the very highest perceptual centers of our brain. It's called the neocortex, where we all have our executive decision-making capacities and those type of things. And the heart is informing that part of the brain as well, neurologically. And as it turns out, and you mentioned this, the brain does send information to the heart, but that's to control the timing of the heartbeat, pretty much. But the heart is sending a lot more information to the brain than it's getting from the brain. And brain function is actually critically dependent upon information it gets from the heart, in which the heart is influencing how our brain functions. Without that heart connection, the brain doesn't function very well. And so we have this neurological conversation that's occurring between the heart and the brain. And simply said, the heart's doing most of the talking. And that was one of the ways which we could say, wait a minute, this is pretty interesting. You know, there are others, the biophysical communication, which is the blood pressure wave, the fact that the heart produces hormones. That was actually published in 1983, but it was like, who knew that, right? The heart was reclassified as part of our hormonal system because they found out it produced a whole lot of hormones. And then lastly, we took it into the energetic heart understanding, the electro or magnetic field produced by the heart. So all those things added up to a story that showed that even at the physical level, the heart was doing a lot more than we ever thought, and that it was actually had an implied intelligence and was actually making huge contributions to what we normally call intelligence, which is brain function.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk about the electromagnetic field that the heart generates for a few minutes. That's something that we can measure. It goes out 3-4 feet, right, from the heart in all directions. And so electromagnetic fields, if you take an electron, you move it, it has a field. If you move it through space, it creates a wave in space, and that's called a radio wave, right? And we can send that out. If you right, and that's how light is generated, which is obviously electromagnetic radiation. Also, it's just a wavelength that we can perceive with our eyeballs. Radio waves, television waves, microwaves, cell phone communications are all the same type of wave. It's just that our eyeballs don't see them. So we have a device that picks them up and decodes them and puts them into something that we can consume with our senses. So if the heart is creating this electromagnetic field, then it must also be creating waves.
It does
go out into space, right?
Yeah, what you're saying is that magnetic fields carry information.
Yes.
Whether it's your cell phone or whether it's a radio, but magnetic fields carry information. In the heart's field, the one that we're talking about now, the measurable field is measured 3 to 4 feet outside the body, surrounding us in 360 degrees, measured with magnetometers, which are the most traditional instrument for measuring magnetic fields. So this is the most conservative measurement we come up with, right?
Right.
The implications are much larger than that, but this is the most conservative way. So the heart's producing this field, and it is imprinted with information. It's a carrier of information. The question is, what is that information? Well, what we've determined is that information is our emotions. What we're feeling is changing the frequency pattern in that field. In other words, it's changing the field itself. The frequencies in the magnetic field change depending upon what we are experiencing emotionally. If we're feeling frustrated, angry, those type of feelings, you see what's called an incoherent spectra. The frequencies in the field are fighting for power. They are random. There's less order in the frequency pattern. Conversely, when we see someone that's experiencing or measure someone's field, when they're experiencing a heart-related emotion, like let's say appreciation or love or care, the field produces a more what's called harmonic sequence in the frequency pattern. It becomes more ordered. The frequencies begin to work together more synchronistically, more harmoniously than when we're experiencing anger or frustration. And so we're imprinting this field and we're literally broadcasting our emotions.
Yes.
Other research says also that this field not only sends information, it receives information. So we are communicating and interfacing at unseen levels constantly with each other, with plants, with animals, with the earth itself, and probably beyond, through this field that's being produced by our heart.
Yes. And if you think about what we were just talking about with electronics, I can't see it. I can't see a radio wave, but my cell phone has an apparatus that can translate that into something. Emotions that are being broadcast by the heart can also be that same wave coming at us. Our heart is the exact device that is going to be able to translate that. And of course, I can see anger on someone's face, but sometimes you can feel it when someone enters a room, right? You don't even need to have you don't even need to be facing them. You can just feel whatever they have. Sometimes it's joy, sometimes it's frustration, whatever it is. And so then the heart would be that apparatus that does that translation.
Think about the heart like the cell phone analogy you just made. Your cell phone is sending information. It's also receiving information. You can make a call to someone, you can receive a call from someone, right? Or a text.
Yes.
The heart's doing the same thing, right?
Yes.
And that where it gets interesting, and this is where I can have to go a little what I would call non-scientific for a minute, but my belief and experience of all that is that the heart is receiving lots of information from a variety of different sources and fields. That information enters our system, our human operating system, through the heart. It's translated at super, super high speed, incalculable speed, to the brain. The brain interprets that information, turns it into thoughts, feelings, visual images, things like that. And so because it's being interpreted through the brain, the interpreter gets the credit for where it came from.
Right.
But a lot of times it doesn't come from there. It's coming from the interface between that and all this information is actually here, not here. This is their interpreter. This is one of the ways in which we access that information.
Right. That makes so much sense. And because we have put so much stress and emphasis and value on logical analytical thought, and that is associated with the brain, then we say, oh, I must have derived that through deduction or whatever.
We need both. We need some logic. We need to figure things out back and forth. There's a business consultant I worked with a number of years ago that used a term with me that I really liked, which, making decisions from informed intuition.
Yes. I love that.
And then go to your heart and do it, right? So you both sides of that equation, right?
Yeah, the balance is beautiful. Okay, so this is actually getting ready to lead us, because when we talk about the heart being not only the sender of the message, but also the receiver and the decoder of the message, and the fact that we're in a field and probably nested in many fields. We'll talk about that in a bit. We're going to get into a global discussion in a minute, but let's back up. I want to go through heart coherence and HRV first, so we can get the foundation of all of that in the background.
We needed a mechanism to measure changes occurring in heart, brain, body communication. And how do we decode that? How do we understand that better? And what our scientists found was that there was already a language that was out there called heart rate variability. Heart rate variability is measuring the timing between heartbeats. Simply stated, it's our heart rhythms. Heart rate variability is not just measuring how fast or slow the heart is beating like a fitness monitor does. It's measuring the timing changes that are occurring, because your heart is constantly either speeding up or slowing down in varying degrees. It's very nuanced the way it pumps blood. When I move my hand like this right now, it's causing subtle timing changes in how my heart is pumping blood throughout my entire system. And so heart rate variability looks at this, right? At the timing changes. Now, one of its primary purposes is to look at the health of the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is controlling the timing of the heartbeat. And so they use it to measure autonomic health, and they also use it to measure.
Heart rate variability, a high degree of heart rate variability is actually a good thing. It's
Yeah, absolutely. The more range of speed your heart has, the healthier it is. In other words, if you had this much variability, the heart can't speed up or slow down very much, right? And that's why people get out of breath when they walk upstairs a lot of times. They don't have pumping,
because their heart's not responding to the activity they're trying to do.
To the physical exertion that's happening going up the stairs. When younger people, we begin to lose it when we get older, and it's part of a natural aging process. So heart rate variability is also a measurement of aging, right? But a younger person, or a person that's really healthy, has a wide range of speeds in which the heart can operate. Now, that's a good thing. It's a sign of health, a sign of resilience, a sign of internal flexibility, a sign of cardiovascular efficiency. All of that is tied to heart rate variability. And that's primarily what heart rate variability was being used to look at. What we also found is that, first of all, the researchers that were studying heart rate variability thought it was a totally involuntary response. That it was just something that was happening automatically, that people did not have any control over that. Our scientists did experiments and showed that that was not true. That there was another big influencer of heart rate variability, and going back again, that was our emotions. The experiments were done where we have test subjects in our lab. They would be sitting in a chair. They weren't moving, talking, doing anything that would cause fluctuations in the in the heart rate variability. And we were asking them to go through a series of emotional shifts, and when we'd ask them to think about something that makes you feel frustrated, right? And they would. And you see that the heart rhythm was, speeding up and slowing down and speeding up and slowing down. Like it couldn't make up its mind. It was very jagged and irregular, right? And then we said, okay, now shift into a feeling of appreciation or care. And they would. And all of a sudden, this sine wave-like pattern would happen where the heart was like speeding up. And at a certain point, it releases itself and then naturally slows back down. And it was this beautiful flowing wave, right? When people were experiencing appreciation or care, So then they decoded that and figured out that, there's jagged and irregular rhythms, which will happen when you're walking around. It's okay. You're not supposed to, but that when they're being created by an emotional state, they were triggering changes in the body that weren't optimal. It was triggering releases of hormones into the system that you didn't want too many of, like more adrenaline or cortisol. It was sending signals up into the brain that were beginning to shut down the higher perceptual centers of the brain.
Yes.
Or the instinctual and emotional brain became the dominant part of our perceptual apparatus. Conversely, when we had that sine wave-like pattern, the opposite effects were occurring. More DHEA into the system, more oxytocin into the system. Higher perceptual centers of the brain become more active, more electrically active and alive, and so we begin to perceive differently. And so all that was coming from an interesting, the term we've all heard for our whole life that all of a sudden came to life scientifically in a new way was a change of heart changes everything. Change that rhythm and all of a sudden the whole deal changes, right? The physiology, the brain, how you see, the eyes, everything changed, right? So we determined that when you were in that highly ordered sine wave-like rhythm, that you were in a state of high coherence. Coherence is a highly ordered state where all the body systems are working together in harmony. It's a state that is triggered by and then accompanied by sustained, regenerative, uplifting emotions. So it's a state where we're really operating at our very best. That's really the very best that we are, and it can be measured. You're looking at coherence. So they were able to find the measurement. Took that further and developed algorithms, patented algorithms that began to show what was coherent and what wasn't, right? And then incorporated that into technology that we turned into consumer technology. HeartMath's Inner Balance Trainer, for example, is a measurement of our coherence. And it trains people to become more coherent. It doesn't do anything to you, but it gives you feedback on the level of coherence that you're in. And all that came out, from looking at how is the heart functioning physically? What's it doing differently? And all that was a result of that. One last part of the story is that this is where Doc Childre is brilliant in a way. In the early days when we were looking at a way to decode the heart's communication, we were looking at the ECG signal. When you go to a doctor and you get your electrocardiogram. And Doc one day said, don't look at the EKG, look at the space between the heartbeats.
Yes.
And the space between the heartbeats was a measurement of heart rate using heart rate variability, measuring the timing between the heartbeats. That was the space. The doctor says, don't look at the heartbeat, look at the space between the heartbeats. And that's where you'll find your answer. That's his intuition.
Yes, beautiful. And that is, and those changes in that space is what, and then graphing them out, it shows us either the sine wave or the jaggedness, which speaks to either the coherence or the incoherence.
Coherence and incoherence and relative degrees of that, right?
Yes, yes. And and the Inner Balance Trainer that you're talking about, I have one. I have the old school one that you plug into your iPhone, you clip on your ear, and and it shows you. It gives you a score. You've splayed that out into red, not only red, green, yellow, but once you get into the green, you can go up to
numbers. And you can gamify it and set goals, accumulate points, and all that stuff. And this way I use mine. And it became a big thing for HeartMath, a big contribution and a big driver of business. And we had this technology that could really help people learn to access more of their heart's intelligence, even though we didn't call it that. There were health benefits. There were benefits for operational readiness in the military and the police forces and all these places where the language became a little different. But the end result is getting people more synchronized with themselves, and tremendous health benefits. And we have tens of thousands of health professionals in our database that utilize our technology in improving patient outcomes. And so the applications were huge, and we're developing more of that stuff now. This is not over. There's new things in development as we speak, right? It will come out probably in the next year. And so that was a big deal. All of a sudden now we had not only tools and techniques, which is really the core of the HeartMath system, techniques to help you access more of the heart and all that. We had this whole system of tools and techniques. We had an underpin with scientific research, and now we even had technology to add to the party. So we had more of a complete system that we could share with the world.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I just want to make a note here and tie it together for the people who have been in touch with or aware of the buzzword now, the buzz phrase, flow state. Mm-hmm. It's there's been many books written about it. The one that I read was Stealing Fire. And it's that state where you have access to higher intuition. You kind of forget yourself. You get into a state of flow. And that's very valuable for for athletes, for law enforcement and military, for anyone who's trying to do work that is creative, right? It's big in the Silicon Valley, it's big amongst artists. And what you're talking about is absolutely that. It's the beginning of how do I get into a flow state? And it starts with heart coherence.
That's right, exactly right. And access is the flow state. People call it flow state, and that's one of the ways in which it's applied. We've trained lots of world-class athletes, for example. You mentioned athletes. What for? Well, they want to try to find more of that internal flow state, right, in themselves. That's what they're trying to find, is how do they be at the very best of their peak performance, and how do they sustain it, because the flow state for an athlete, and I've talked to many of them, they said, look, it's a random thing. All of a sudden it happens. And it's like you don't even realize how it happened or whatever, but you can't miss, right? Wish I could have that every night. Well, I can't say you can have it every night. Life has modulations in it, but you can create more of it rather than wait for it.
Right. So one of the values and how I use my heart rate variability monitor is training myself to recognize it, not only to take the action to get into a heart coherence, but now that I've done that, knowing what it feels like, so I can at least have some idea of where I am without the monitor on in my daily life, and do some of those techniques to get into that space.
Important point that we're trying to publish more on now in the descriptions of the technologies, what's called the carryover effect. In other words, none of us are supposed to walk around in measurable coherence all the time. It wouldn't be natural. It wouldn't be right? The heart's got to do other things. It's got more to do than that. But when you get into coherence for a little while, whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or half an hour, you carry that over into the next things that you do in your day. You're coming at those next events in your life from a new baseline.
Yeah.
So you're able to better navigate life from being more connected to the heart's intelligence. So the carryover effect has got to be positioned more for us, I think, in terms of how we position our offerings to the world, because that's one of the real main benefits of it all. It trains you to what it feels like. It sets a new baseline within your system, so you're naturally more coherent, and that begins to affect how you function in the world.
Yeah, and for those of you who haven't made this very obvious connection yet, that we're talking about an aspect of meditation. If you're doing meditation, I shudder to say that because my partner's a meditation teacher and there is no right way. But let's say if you're doing an effective meditation, you're going to be in your heart space. You're going to be in coherence. And I actually use my heart rate variability monitor when I'm meditating as an indication of how, and I can tell, but before I come out of the meditation, I pretty much know what the number is going to be on the screen when I look at it, because I could feel it. So, and meditation teachers around the world will say that one of the reasons that you learn to meditate is what you're talking about. They don't say the carryover effect, but they'll say things like you meditate so that you can respond better throughout your day. So you take a baseline of peace and calm throughout your day, so you can live a better life, is what it boils down to. That's what we're talking about here. And that's one of the most powerful ways you can do it, is to bring yourself into coherence for a time, because that's going to carry into the rest of your day.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. And that's where we have to get to with all this. It's like understanding the science, using technology, understanding big picture views. Finally, it needs to get down to, are we really cleaning up our own act inside? Are we really able to move past some of our biases and judgments? Are we really, consciously putting out more of the qualities of the heart in our daily interactions with other people. What happens when we get confronted with something that triggers our vanity, and takes us out, and all those things. That's the game, right? That's the game of life. That's what goes on. And it's a never-ending process, and making peace with the fact that it's a never-ending process is a part of the game, right? Because we all want these changes and growth. Changes happen over time, and we find that we're very different people than we were, say, 2 or 3 years or 5 years ago. We look back through the rearview mirror, but it's a moment-to-moment, day-to-day process.
Yes,
that's what all this ends up having to be about for me. Having done this a long time, that's what matters, and what I share with the world. I think having some knowledge of the science and things like that is helpful in how I can communicate with people. At the end of the day, it's about, wanting, I don't know how to say it exactly, maybe to help reduce some of the unnecessary human suffering.
Yes.
People put themselves through, through their processes and how they approach life and all the things that get them, and to help people learn to move a notch above all that, above the fray. And because there's a lot waiting for us there.
Yes.
Quality of life experience we can have amidst the challenges and the chaos and the confusion that we see. There is another experience available. And more people are coming to realize that. A lot of people are going through that process now in different ways. Whether they know HeartMath or not, it's not important. Is they're stepping it up on the inside, and that's happening. And then there's a connectivity factor and all that makes it easier for other people to do the same thing. And
yes,
I'm just about that, really, about helping the individual hit that next notch within themselves, and then seeing the collectiveness of that have an influence on creating a new and better world.
Beautiful. And that's where we're going next. You touch on human suffering, and I've been observing for 72 episodes now that the reason that we need to take our evolution into our own hands is because all of our systems, governmental, financial, educational, religious, they've all failed. They've failed to do two things. They've failed to bring us into harmony with each other and with our environment, and they failed to end human suffering. And that's kind of that's their stated goal, especially religion, but governments as well. So we're going to take care of that human suffering business. Well, suffering is an inside job, right? Mm-hmm. And so, we need to take it into our own hands and actually do things and empower the individual with processes that actually work in doing that, right? And that's something that maybe religion at its purest form intended to do, but what, name a religion that stayed pure for very long, right? So so here we are taking matters, bringing it down to the street, but right now let's shift into the global perspective. Okay. And and start to talk about connectivity. I know that your team of scientists is very rigorous about what they will publish, even though they publish some 400 plus papers, right? Yeah. In peer-reviewed journals. And they're very rigorous about what they will sanction you to talk about. That's right. But I know that you guys have been collecting data in a lot of very interesting ways. And I do want to talk about the magnetometers and the Global Coherence Initiative. Yeah. Is there anything interesting that has been going on that front that you can talk about? I guess maybe give us. Yeah.
Let me explain to the listener, if I may. We have, first of all, there are two HeartMath organizations with one shared mission: activate the heart of humanity, right? But we have a for-profit, which is I'm the executive vice president of, and we also have a nonprofit. On the nonprofit side is where the scientific research takes place, and some really other cool initiatives, very social conscious initiatives. On the for-profit side, same kind of thing, heart-based mission, but we do a lot more commercially, and certainly development of the technology and things like that are on the for-profit side. But on the nonprofit side, there's an initiative we started, I guess it's been 8 years ago now, called the Global Coherence Initiative, and I'm on the steering committee of that, along with a small handful of other people, some in internal organizations, some outside. And basically, it was something we designed to bring people together and to create more of that harmonious world that we want to see. And a lot of organizations have been doing that, right? And so we figure, okay, we don't want to come in this with, trying to be making ourselves a big deal about it, but we'll make our contribution that way as well. Others are doing it, we'll do it too. So bringing people together to use their heart-focused care and their intention really to create this more better and harmonious world. But it's HeartMath, so science had to show up, right? So our researchers, along with others, developed very sensitive technology that can measure changes in what we'll call the Earth's energetic fields. Our planet produces fields.
Yes.
A couple of them. One's the geomagnetic field, which most people have heard of. It's what a compass measures. The other is called the ionosphere, which is a field that starts just above the atmosphere, goes about 100 and some miles up into space. And these two fields surround our Earth. They are protective layers that protect the Earth itself from incoming space weather. That's solar flares, cosmic rays, solar winds, all this kind of normal events in space. And without those fields, nothing that resembles life can exist, right? You know, we have to have these fields. So we call them Earth ecology in a way, right? So the fields themselves have been researched a lot. And it's well known through lots of research that they're changing all the time. The fields are being influenced by the sun and other factors. And so the fields are changing. And when they change, those changes are impacting human health and behavior. Undeniable now.
Yes.
So we know that. And so we also wanted to know something else. If the fields were affecting us, was it possible that humanity was affecting the fields? So we developed very sensitive technology that we've been deploying around the world in what's called global coherence monitoring sites. And these are sophisticated systems set up. I think we're in 6 or 8 places around the world now. Places like Lithuania, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, Canada, here in the United States.
Good spread.
They're around there, you know, and basically what they're looking at is changes in the fields. You know, these technology we've developed, both in the ionosphere and the geomagnetic field. And they're looking for 3 things. First of all, they're looking to learn more about the fields themselves so that we can make contributions to the academic understanding, academic literature about the fields. They're also doing really, really cool experiments showing for, you know, in even new and more dynamic ways that we are connected to these fields. Humanity is connected, that the fields are affecting us and they're affecting us in the same ways, regardless of where we are in the world or any of our, you know, any of our other beliefs or any of that, where we work, you know, what religion we have, any of that these fields are affecting us in the same way. We've definitively shown that. And the third reason for doing it is a hypothesis. The hypothesis for people to understand is that you're not saying it's true, you're not saying it's not. It's a very neutral position to be in. You're saying there's a possibility of something. Let's take a look. Hypothesis is that mass human emotion from the basically 8 billion of us on this planet, mass human emotion, whether that be a positive emotion thing or a negative emotion thing or whatever, but that mass human emotion could be having a measurable impact on the Earth's energetic fields.
Yes. Okay.
That's the purpose of it. Now, the implications of that are big. If that hypothesis were to prove to be true, it's like one of the people was on the advisory board initially was an author named Jack Canfield. It's one of the sort of patriarchs of this.
Chicken soup for the soul guy.
Yeah, patriarch of the transformational movement, highly respected, you know, iconic, yes. You know, and when he was talking to me about it, he said to me, he said, you realize what's going on here? He said, if this proved to be true, it'd be revolutionary, because what you'd be showing was scientific proof that all of our meditations, prayers, thoughts, feelings, affirmations, all of that, that we already believe in, now have a substantive reason to even believe in them more, right? Something to that effect. And so that's what we're doing. So we have this system set up and we're monitoring that. Now, you mentioned that the scientists are being, you know, always being conservative. That they don't talk a lot about any phenomenal effects that they're seeing. They're just systematically collecting data, analyzing the data, showing changes, doing the experiments, showing the interconnectivity and all of that. And I'm sure they're observing things from time to time, but there needs to be more done, more substantive work done to create a better understanding of what they're seeing. And eventually they'll publish more on that. But when I think this particular project is especially important to be conservative, because the tendency would be to throw out information that shows the phenomenalistic side of it. And that would attract attention. And that would attract even popularity. You know, more of HeartMath could be more popular. There's a tendency to want to do that. But the scientific communities can also pick apart everything they do and then validate the great work that's being done. And scientists I found over my years of observing them, they like to fight.
Mm-hmm. Yep, because they know it all. Each of them knows it all. if you can imagine.
Right. So you don't want to provide a lot of argument here, on something
Yeah.
as important as what this could mean. And that's why the conservative approach is being taken. It's not trying to be secretive or hold back information or
Right. Okay.
playing that game. It's just like, don't start getting all out there claiming all this stuff until you've really got very publishable, very detailed scientific work done behind it. In the meantime, there's plenty that is being published about what the fields are, how the fields are affecting us.
Yeah.
The other thing they're doing, which you may or may not know about it, is they're actually doing research with trees.
Mm.
Let me explain. First of all, when I first heard that they're putting time, energy, and money into doing tree research, I had the same kind of question, like, what is this about, right?
No, I think that's juicy. I'm totally in love with the trees. I live in the Great Northwest, and yeah, so
well, part of the research,
my interest.
the overarching research that's going on today is research showing the interconnectivity between all living systems, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we're all, in fact, connected. Going back to the very beginning in your introduction to our conversation about all this. So they're trying to show more of that. So, they're doing it with people. They're doing it with the people in this relationship to the earth fields and all of that. But they also felt they needed to do it with plants. And there's also animal stuff going on too, which I'll talk about the plants. So what they've done is they've developed sensors that are placed on trees that measure the electrical potentials being produced by trees. Most people don't realize this, but trees are producing electricity. And that electricity varies from time to time. It changes, And so they're creating a network of these too. And they're actually in the process now. They don't have enough of them yet. They're making them as they go right now. But they started a citizen science project where people can eventually get one of these and put it on their own trees in their own yard. And it's sending information back to the Institute's research labs. For people that are interested in this, go to heartmath.org, O-R-G. It's our nonprofit. And you'll see stuff about the tree research. And what they're hoping to show is, like, we want to show that there's communication going on between the trees. We want to show that the trees are being influenced by the geomagnetic fields and all of that. They already know they are. Just trying to give more and more proof and evidence of it. The trees are responsive as well to all of this, and that there's a connection going on, a universal connection with different kind of trees in different parts of the world that are basically, experiencing similar things, that they're all connected, this global connecting network. So Global Coherence Initiatives looking at the Earth's fields, the tree research projects looking at the tree kingdom, so to speak. We're doing all this stuff on coherence, looking at people, and we're stepping all this down in the street of, like, how in the hell do you get along with your boss better? So yeah, that's the package.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I know, we're running a little short on time. We don't have time to get too deeply into the whole discussion about prior to the magnetometers, the random number generators. I think a lot of people have heard this stories about how they started reacting when the planes hit in 9/11, and how there's a definite give and take dynamic between the fields of the earth and the emotional intensity of the collective of humanity.
That's right.
Right. Which I think is a whole discussion we could spend a lot of time on. But I think the upshot is that we have a field, you and I have a field of energy around us that is informing our formation, that is basically orchestrating our matter into life. And that field is also broadcasting out into the fields in which we're nested. And we're nested in multiple fields, right? Obviously, there's the universal mind, or you could call it the universal mind, or space-time, or the whole universe, the one. But then within that, there's all manner of holons, you could say, and the Earth is one of them, and the field of humanity is one of them, and then the biosphere and so forth. And so we're within those fields. We're part of those fields. And we are impacting those fields, and we are being impacted by those fields, is kind of the upshot of it, right?
That's right. And I think what we have to understand too is that, some of the things we've been talking about today are being done with conservative measurement. But my real belief in all this is that you're producing the heart field, et cetera, is really non-local,
Mm-hmm.
is beyond the boundaries of time and space. And we've seen indications of that already in our scientific inquiry. But the reason for saying that is that we've created a field already through a shared experience that we're having for everyone who's watching this. But that shared experience is not bound by where someone is in the world or when they're actually watching this. Somebody may come along and they're looking at your podcast, Dave, 6 months after, we did this. And they're still accessing the collective field that's been created through our conversation. So it's beyond time, it's beyond space. And I think that's important. And in the time that we have left, which is just a few minutes, I'd like to, if I could, to just take a moment to do a little heart focus exercise.
I think that would be a perfect way to take us out.
Spend our time together with a little heart radiation. We'll use it for our own benefit, but we'll also just take a little part of it and use it for the betterment of life and for others, and for creating this new interactive fractal world that we that we all know is here, and bringing it to life.
Excellent.
So I'd like invite everybody to focus your attention here in the area of the heart. Center of your chest, close your eyes if you'd like, and you can also, if you want, put your hand on your heart. And with your attention there, I want you to breathe normally, but a little deeper than you normally would, but in a rhythm that's comfortable for you. And as you're breathing this way, I want you to imagine as if your breath is flowing in and out through the area of the heart. So breathe in a natural, comfortable rhythm, a little deeper than normal, imagining your breath is flowing in and out through that area. Continue to breathe this way. And now I'd like you to activate a regenerative, uplifting emotion. Don't force it, make it easy. Maybe just feel appreciation you can have for some of the good things in your life. Just feel that feeling. Or maybe you'd like to feel the love or the care you have for someone or something, a person, a place, a pet. Whatever comes to you right now, let your heart be your guide on it. Just continue to breathe in and out through the area of the heart while you feel a regenerative, uplifting emotion. Just hold that feeling. Let's take it one step further. I want you to gently radiate a feeling, as best you can, of compassion to the heart of humanity. All the people in the world, especially the ones that are facing challenges, and gently radiate like a warm, glowing lantern from your heart the energy of, or the feeling of, compassion. And this brief moment of heart connection is helping all of us, right on down to the biology and the physiology, making a contribution to the world itself, informing the energetic field of our collective consciousness. So it's a great service just to take moments in time like we're doing right now and do that. So lastly, let's just send each other a little love and care and appreciation for all the people who are being a part of this podcast now or in the future. You can open your eyes if you'd like. And thank you for that.
Yes, thank you, Howard. That was beautiful. And it's been such a pleasure and privilege to have you on the show today. Thank you for illuminating us with not only knowledge, but the feeling, the actual vibrations that you send out. And your life's work is is an inspiration to me, and I feel that call. It took me a few more years to get there. Yeah, but we're doing the same work, and I love your message and your presence in the world. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Dave, I think you're a good man. You're certainly a great thinker, and you're a really good podcast host. So watch Dave's podcast.
You heard right there.
Sometime. I enjoyed being with you today. Really did.
Yeah, thank you, Howard. Okay, I'll cut it there. Good stuff. I really appreciate you being on the show. This has really been a lot of fun chatting, and yeah, and just, I think it'll make a really good show.
Right. Let us know when and where, and send it to information to Gabriella, and so she can point people to it and stuff like that.
Excellent. Good luck. I didn't ask you before we hop off. What are you working on? What's next for you?
I'm working on a lot of video or film-based learning. I created the HeartMath experience.
Yeah.
Released last year. I was the lead on that whole deal. And so I've been recreating a lot of that stuff now. I've been, doing one now on subject-specific stuff, shorter. Instead of an hour and a half, it's 25 minutes. But it's on actually, very practical thing, transforming stress.
Yeah.
I just completed a program for Europe's biggest distributor of transformational content, a company called Unity, spelled with a Y, Y-O-U-N-I-T-Y. They're Europe's big dog in that space. And I have done a course for them. It's basically 6 hours, me on camera,
Wow.
High def Howard, and so I'm in the process now of working with them to get that released and all that, which will be distributed next year throughout Europe. So a lot of, all my speaking stuff and all that went away. And of course, with COVID,
Sure.
Lots going on here, HeartMath in the business, tons of stuff. I live in a meeting, basically, that's what happens. And so involved in lots of meetings about a lot of things that you wouldn't suspect I'd be involved in, but all the stuff, the financial stuff, the technology stuff.
You're the executive vice president. You
right, the back and forth.
Fingers in all the pies.
In the institute and us and all that stuff and the legal stuff and trademark that and the other and copyright this, that, and the other and all that stuff. Me too. But so I have two kind of roles. One's the business guy role and the other is the public figure role. So, I enjoy sort of trying to mix the two skillfully,
Yeah. I get living in a meeting. I was in tech sector for 20 years, spent a lot of time down in the Valley. And I stepped away from that. It's been 2 years now to do this. Yeah. And I frankly don't miss all the meetings.
Well, all the best to you. You keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a good job of it.
Thank you, Howard. I appreciate it.
Gotta get to a meeting.
All right. Best of everything. Talk to you later. All right. Bye.